everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm super excited to be joined by Dr Leisha Strachan. Leisha, great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really, really excited to be speaking with you. And we're going to be talking about a project that's very close to your heart. Before we talk about that, why don't you start by introducing yourself to the Sports Psych Show audience?
Sure. As I mentioned, I am super excited. So thanks for having me. I am here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, on Treaty One land, and I'm just so thrilled to be able to chat about our work. And this is what researchers dream of: being able to chat about their research and the things that they do. So, as I mentioned, I'm a first generation Black Canadian. Both of my parents, I have to acknowledge them every time I speak about my path, because they are the reasons why I do what I do and the reasons why I'm be able to be here and to be in this field of sports psychology. So Jerome and Margaret Strachan, I'm going to give them a shout out. And they came to Canada from Grenada, small island in the Caribbean, in 1968. So they've been here for quite a while. And because of that legacy, I've been able to have my education here in Canada. I've been able to do a bachelor's in physical education and in education as well. And I actually taught school. I was a school teacher for 3 years. I taught physical education, kindergarten to grade 8, at a very small Catholic school here in Winnipeg. And then I went ahead and did a master's in sports psychology, and we could talk about that path a little bit later. And then my PhD, my master's at the University of Windsor, and my PhD then at Queen's University. And at Windsor, I was under the guidance of Dr. Krista Chandler, and at Queen's, Dr. Jean Côté and Dr. Janice Deacon. So amazing mentors. I've been so blessed to have incredible mentors my whole life. So that's it. And then now currently I then got a job back at the University of Manitoba. So I'm again blessed to be able to be where I started my, I guess, post-secondary journey, in the exact same faculty. I see my picture on the wall every day when I'm walking when I'm walking by, class of '97. And yeah, I'm a full professor now here at the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Recreation Management, and I'm also currently serving as Associate Dean Research and Graduate Studies in my faculty.
What a journey. And you're pretty busy then, right? I mean, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Very.
And that journey to becoming a professor of sports psychology started as a competitor in baton twirling.
Absolutely, yes. In the sport of baton twirling, which is another thing, that's my other thing that's near and dear to my heart. I've started in the sport when I was 5 years old and had a chance to compete for 18 years in the sport, and had a chance to represent Canada 7 times at various world championships and have 2 bronze medals from world championships. So all those experiences just as a high performance athlete, as a young high performance athlete, I went to my first world championships when I was 13. So when you go through those experiences at such a young age, I think it really molds you, and it can, as I study more in terms of positive youth development and thinking about sports psychology. I always had. I'm again blessed to have always positive experiences in sport, but we know not everybody does. With what we know in the news, with all kinds of abuse and things that are directed towards young people, and so I count myself very lucky to have had such amazing mentors and to have a positive experience in sports, so I can understand that that progression at the young age. And then I stayed in the sport till I was 23. As a competitive athlete, and then I've been coaching now, going into my can't even say it. Going into my 29th year of coaching this year. So I've been coaching a very long time as well. And I have my own club here in the city that we're going into our 27th year in having a club called Aerial Fusion Baton. And so I've been able to, really fortunate to be able to mentor a lot of young people as well.
That's incredible. And you sent me through a clip of you competing in the World Champions baton twirling, and it was just amazing. I've
Yeah.
obviously seen it before, but I really paid close attention to what you were doing, and numerous times I was thinking, how on earth did you catch that? You'd done some kind of triple axel in the air or something like that, and spun around half a dozen times, and after throwing up the baton, you'd caught it. Just incredible, and then balancing it in certain positions. I mean, how do you start with
Yes.
that? I mean, do you remember your first few sessions? What got
Yeah.
you really passionate about it?
Absolutely. The joke in my family is that I should have been in tap dancing because we signed up for baton at my local community
Yeah.
center. And of course, my mom, coming from a small Caribbean island, had never, ever seen a baton before. So it was nothing that my family had ever seen. And when we went to the community center, she went to sign me up for tap dancing. But the tap dancing class was full. And the table beside it, they just kept pushing baton, like, there's space in baton twirling. It's the next table beside. And my mom was like, I have no idea what that is, but sign her up because I need her out of the house. Like, pretty much that's what happened. And uh, and I remember just being 5 and going to this first little community center hall and no idea what a baton was, and I they put it in my hand and that was it. Like, I loved the challenge of it. I loved that it was different, that not a lot of people did it. I loved that I can be creative, and we had a teacher who really encouraged play and just like discovering things even if it wasn't technically perfect. And I stayed in that particular program for like 2 years, just doing recreational baton, going once a week, just fooling around. And it was that teacher who then said, you know what, like, she's picking up a lot, and there's only so far I can take her. So maybe she wants to go try this clinic that was happening, this summer camp. And that summer camp, that was it. I went to the summer camp. Whoever the teachers were there, I just was like, I could just pick up things very quickly. And there was a coach there, my very first, I would say, competitive coach. Her name is Joyce Ormshaw. And she was at that clinic, and she approached my mom and just said, if she wants to do competitive, like, I offer these programs, and she can come a couple times a week, and there's group routines and there's individual stuff, and she can do all kinds of things. And and that really was it for me. And then my mom made sure that I practiced. I wasn't going to a lesson, and she wasn't going to be investing money and spending money without me practicing. So, she used to take me to gyms or outside, or at that time, you didn't need permits to go into anything. So you could just go into a school gym, and if the caretaker was nice and they were okay to let you use the gym. And my mom used to bring our caretaker food and dinner and stuff. And he used to just say, go ahead, use the gym. Scouts aren't in till 8 o'clock. You can just stay in there. So I did, I mean, that was influential, I think, to just me developing as quickly as I did. And I'm a copycat. I love to watch people and copy what they're doing. And so I used to watch the seniors and always want to do what the seniors are doing. Always got in trouble for for doing things beyond my skill level. But again, that those experiences were influential. And then I was then subsequently also introduced to one of my huge baton mentors. Her name's Carrie McKittrick. She became my choreographer when we started doing routines to music and such. And she just really set the path for understanding sports psychology, I think. She introduced us at a very young age to imagery. Um, at the time, she was working and doing some choreography in Australia, and she came back to Canada with these tapes, these cassette tapes of imagery, and asked us to do them. And so I used to listen to this gentleman with a very low, slow voice telling me to breathe and relax and clear my mind. And all those things I remember. She introduced us to self-talk, introduced us to goal setting without using that language. But I was very fortunate that she was so forward thinking, and still is to this day. And I was just very, very, very glad to be able to be introduced to these concepts in sports, applied sports psychology, at such a young age.
There's five things I've written down there that really shone through in terms of your experiences.
Yes.
The capacity to, you mentioned kind of do things or get things quite quickly. So it sounds
Mm.
like you had a little bit of a natural propensity to baton.
Yes.
Being a bit of a copycat, as in modelling others, and it has that kind of being a geeky sports psych here, that Albert Bandura vicarious experience scenario.
Definitely.
Yeah, I can see them doing it. Right, I'm going to try and do that. I know I can do that.
Yes.
Early exposure to mental skills, which you just mentioned there, which we could talk a little bit more about.
Yeah.
You started at 5 years old, which is obviously quite early, and it sounds like your early experiences were recreational. But
Yes.
what really interests me, Leisha, is it also sounds like you were you know quite serious quite early, and you were exposed to quite a bit of a practice quite early. I mean, what obviously now we live in a world of concern for early seriousness, early specialization, the importance of multi-sports. Your experiences back then with relevance to current research around early experiences. I mean, did you have any thoughts on that? Is
Mm.
there a bit of a disparity between your experiences and what we might say now, or not so much?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'd have these conversations with Dr. Côté when I was going through my PhD work, because I was always really interested in high performance sport, but particularly also young people who are like early specializing. And I think those types of athletes are really at my heart. And I just think of my own experience, and I'd always talk to Jean and say, well, like, I turned out okay. Like, like I feel like I turned out okay, and he would say, well, but you didn't only do sport. Like, and it's true. Like, I really only did baton. I was involved in some other sports growing up, but baton was really at the center of everything. But I was definitely in music. Like, I was in piano lessons. I had to go to cultural group every Friday night for 3 hours and do Caribbean dancing. Caribbean dancing is also a big part of my developing growing up. I started Caribbean dancing when I was 7 and
Wow.
danced well into my adulthood. And I run a group now where we teach kids about Caribbean and African culture through the arts. So I still that's still a big part of me, and my development. Culture is a big piece. And I was always involved in things at school. I was always involved in committees. I was always involved in all kinds of things. So he would say, you didn't. I mean, you specialized in sport, but you also sampled in a lot of other things, and you had other things to keep you grounded. And you're right. When we think about sport and as it is now, there's a professionalization of youth sport that I think many youth sport researchers are uncomfortable with. That idea of participating in one sport year round, and choosing something really quickly. I'm even bothered by hockey's big in Canada, and I'm bothered even by 7-year olds already
Mm,
being typecast as
yeah.
goalies. At such a young age. How do you know that they can't do something else or in another position, or why don't they have opportunities to do that? So there is a professionalization of youth sport, and so I was, again, as you mentioned, I had all these early experiences, but these early experiences were couched by also being well rounded and in different skills as well. That, and again, and all those different experiences that you have in other activities do lend themselves to what you're doing now or what you're doing in sports. So even though I didn't enjoy piano, and my mom would laugh at this because I wanted to quit multiple times and was not allowed to until I got to a certain level, as is our many immigrant family experiences, I think. Like, no, you're staying in piano until you get to this level. Like, there's no discussion. So, pushing through something I didn't enjoy, I know is not fun, but I'm very fortunate in my sport now to do lots of choreography. I've traveled. I've been working with a club in Scotland for a bit. I've worked with clubs in England. I've done some work in Australia. I've done work across the country, where I'm asked to do choreography, work with music, and that experience of being able to understand music and phrasing, volumes, key changes. the highs and lows of pieces, the major and minor of it all. Like those all help me as a choreographer and in terms of movement and dance and the way I hear music. So I guess thank you, mom. But those, I was able to do a
Mm.
lot of different things. I think that's what's missing right now in youth sport too, is that even if you want to invest in one sport, and as you mentioned, I had an affinity for baton, clearly, that who knew, but but I was pretty coordinated. I could understand movement patterns and understand the sport, and I could just understand it. I had a different understanding of sport, I think, than of that sport than others did. And I was lucky to have coaches who identified that really quickly. You could see that really quickly and encouraged me to develop. Um, but my mom was really adamant on, like, there's other things that you need to also participate in. And if it's not other sports, it's going to be other activities that you're going to do. And again, fortunate that I had parents that wanted to invest in my brother and I, being able to, like, do extra jobs, like sacrifice things in their own lives in order for my brother and I to have experiences. So, yeah.
I think that's really fascinating. A couple of things I've written down there: multiple activity sampling, multiple activity participation, and that actually,
Mm.
I think that we are. Obviously, as sports psychologists within in our world, we're becoming more and more passionate about the importance of multiple sports sampling. But you've hit on something really important there: is that, well, hang on, yeah, okay, yes, but this can also be multiple activity sampling. So I can have a sport that I'm taking, that I'm passionate about, that I'm doing lots of practice and playing with, but and I might not necessarily have many other sports, but as long as I've got multiple activity sampling, as Jean Côté said to you, then that's important.
Absolutely. And to me, that assists in the recovery piece. We know in sports psychology as sports practitioners the importance of athletes recovering.
Yeah.
And part of that is also being in tune with some of their artistic passions and some of their other passions. And we how many times have we heard athletes that are like, I don't know what else I like because all I've done is this sport, and I think it's part of our responsibility when we're thinking about consulting and working with athletes that we're asking them about who they are as humans and who and what are other things that they do. And I believe that everyone has an artistic passion. Some people have found it already, some people haven't. But I think we have to create space for that and for people to find what those are and to have those outlets to assist with recovery, to assist with that mental kind of letting go of things and focusing on something else. I think that's just part of who we are as human beings. And I think as practitioners, we have to really think about how we're fostering that as well.
Absolutely, and those other activities could be considered active rest, can't they? Away from your sport.
Totally, playing an instrument or painting or dancing or and again, to me, you're away from sport, but to me also all those things do tie in to who you are. If you understand music well and you're in anything in sport, I don't care what sport it is, sport's all about rhythm, all about cadence, all about timing. And so, understanding that within music and being able to, like, translate that somehow, without you even knowing, I think, into sport. And so as coaches, as myself as a coach too and a practitioner, I'm also the coach who's like, I want you to just focus on baton and that's all I want you to do because I want you to be really good. But I have to take a step back and be like, okay, well, you're in your school musical and you're going to need a bunch of practices off. I might be slightly annoyed by that because of my coach hat, but my other hat is like, yes, go do it because that's what you need to do. And all those experiences as a performer that you have in your musical that you're doing, you're going to bring that to your sport. And when you're on the floor and performing, and I need you to smile or to be a character, you're going to be able to do that. And so I think we have to create space for that, knowing that the few practices that they're going to miss now are a small number along their whole journey.
And to briefly speak to some of the things you said there, I mean, I love the way you framed playing the piano in terms of building competencies that lent itself towards your sport. So, for instance, you mentioned the importance of piano building your
Yes.
choreographic expertise, if you like. Playing the piano
Yes.
also,
Yes.
you talked about pushing through. So, a sense of building a sense of resilience from playing the piano
Absolutely.
that lent
Yes.
itself.
Yeah. I don't know if my piano teacher wanted to go through the resilience, but I I think I made him cry several times. Like, did you practice this week? No. So I don't think he wanted me to build that type of resilience. But yes, definitely that resilience of like, okay, this has to be done. I have to figure out how I'm going to get through this, and it's not going to hurt me. It's I'm going to learn more about myself going through this process, and so just like bearing down and doing it.
Well, you played the piano, I played the violin, and I think my parents would laugh if I said that playing the violin helped my golf career. That's for sure, because that would be a push. That would be a big push.
I'm
Because
sure I can find a connection there.
if
I would
you
find it.
possibly could, if you search deeply, maybe broadly, but I don't think there was. The one last link I wanted to just briefly
Yeah.
dwell on is just the Caribbean dancing, and this notion of
Mm.
potentially a donor to your sport in terms of the rhythm, the dancing, the movement, essentially. Which
Yes,
what? Yeah,
flexibility, timing, coordination, learning about different types of music and beats and rhythms, stamina. I mean, I think I had the best stamina with community dancing. I mean, you're just moving the entire time. So stamina and I don't know, camaraderie. Like I'm still in touch with people who I just like an athlete, you're in charge with teammates and the people you dance with. And again, finding a little bit more about who I am, my own authentic self, right? When I learn about who I am as a person and my culture, and I can identify with that culture and being West Indian, a Caribbean woman, um, I, and again, just that knowledge that I get about who I am, I think I can bring to everything else that I do, right? And so and again, fortunate to have coaches that were also in tune with that, who maybe would select music that maybe I could identify more with in when I was older. Whether it be jazz or whether it be rhythms or beats or African drums or whatever it is. I think that was all really important to learning about who I am. Going through sport as a young person is really just about learning about who you are and what you identify with and what you love and then what you can carry on to your own families and communities and what you bring. And I think that's all we can ask of sport. And I know we ask a lot of coaches, as we're going to get into when we think about research and positive youth development, but this part of our job, like that's what we're here to do. So
wow, fantastic, and that feels like a neat segue to move into what you're doing now. However, I do want to just briefly pause for another few minutes on your baton career, in as much as I'm
Mhm.
always fascinated about the experiences sports psychologists have when they were competing, and when you reflect back. So I watched your performance, and it was incredible. And I just, when you reflect back, how
Thank you.
psychological was it? I mean, you talked about an early introduction to psychological skills, which is awesome. But when you were performing, how psychological was it for you? And I don't want to throw a negative theme into this at all, but I did notice on one occasion, I'm sure it was only once, I think you dropped the baton.
I think I had two drops in there. I'm okay. I'll claim. I think there were
And I
two.
just no, I'm just as I say, I don't want to throw a negative because it was just incredible to watch, amazing skill. But just, do you remember that? How did you deal with
Yes,
that? Do you feel any negatives in that moment? Yeah, just talk to us a little bit about your experience of psychology in the moment while you're competing.
totally. Oh my gosh, baton is, I think, even though it's a small sport, it's one of the best sports for really unpacking sports psychology. When we think
Okay,
about
yeah,
dropping the baton, when I talk to, my young athletes, or even when I go do clinics or talk about things, it's a part of life. That's what it. I mean, obviously, you always want to go for the no drop perfect performance, but we know that
yes.
doesn't happen every single time you're on the floor. And I equate it to basketball. Every time someone tries to shoot, it doesn't always go in.
Yep.
Unless you're Steph Curry and things go in all the time for you.
Yeah,
But
that's true. One exception.
one exception. But it's like that. So in a game, or if you shoot on net as a hockey player, it doesn't always go in. There's stats that you take. So of course, to me, like 2 drops and less, that's a good performance. I mean, I think that's good. I didn't want to drop those, and I'm always conscious as a coach that my athletes don't go on the floor thinking, I think I'd like to have 6 or 8 drops today. That would be fun. Like they don't think that. They want to go out and do the best they absolutely can. But sometimes you have routines that have 6, 5, 6 drops. And then the lessons that you learn after that, right? So it is, I've heard lots of quotes about it's not it's sometimes about winning, it's not always about losing, it's about learning. And so baton just provides so many opportunities to learn. The fact that you have to drop and pick up and keep going, um, when you're out on the floor by yourself, and you have to learn how to, like, obviously you have to practice so much that things are an automatic, that when you pick up the baton, you're not thinking or dwelling on that mistake that you had. You are just like, I have to get back into this music. And so I need to go. And maybe I can think, when things aren't going great, I always tell my athletes, try to shift and think about, okay, maybe I'm going to really just try to perform, because I'm sure after all these drops, my face is now like dropping, and I need to, like, still tell the story, and I still need to perform, and I still need to smile or be in character, whatever it is. Focus more on that, and the baton stuff is going to come. Another thing that I learned so much about myself is just the pre-competition preparation, as well as the in-competition preparation. And it wasn't until I was later in my career, so that's why also in baton or in sport, I always tell people, like, stay as long as you can, because it wasn't until I was 20 that I think I figured, like, oh, this is what I need to perform. And that video you saw, I was 20, and then I twirled for 3 more years after that. But not as an individual. That was the last year I did individual routines. After that, I did pairs, and my medals at World Championships are in the pair event. And again, that idea of, like, oh, I know what I need to do to perform. Now it's a recipe. I got the recipe down, and now it's just about enjoying cooking the recipe every time I'm competing. So, once you get the recipe down, then you can enjoy the meal that then comes from it, and the fruits that come from that labor. So for me, I know that when I arrived at a competition, as social as I am, I'm not a super social athlete when at the beginning of the day. I want to, like, get in my own space. I was someone who threw stuff in the locker room and wanted to be on the competition floor, like, by myself, like, or with 2 or 3 people. I like to warm up right away and do my tricks while no one was on the floor. And then when the floor got too busy with too many people doing their tricks, that's when I would leave. And then I'd go to the locker room, because then the locker room was quiet, and I could put my costume on and do my makeup and listen to my music and get myself, like, ready to go. And once I did those steps, I was fine. I could go and, like, start socializing, talking to people, talk to my coach. Like, I could start doing those things. But that type of reflection, I didn't actually even get to until I started my master's. And then I started to learn more about the field, and I started to go, oh, that's what that's called, pre-competition preparation. Okay, I know I did that. I didn't know what it was called, but I definitely did that. Thought stopping and self-talk. And I'm generally a very positive person, so I never had problems with that, like, negative talk piece. I mean, I think you're always going to have a little bit, but I was always someone who could, like, get myself back to where I needed to be. So yeah, but all those lessons, and those are still things that I do. If I'm teaching a new course and I'm going to a new classroom that I haven't been at, I need to go the day before, and I need to go and check out the podium and, like, see like, image what the room looks like, even if it's 5 minutes that I have, just to, like, okay, this is the room. Okay, yep. And I feel like I'm competing, like, the morning of a lecture, when I'm, like, getting myself going. I feel like I'm in competition mode, because I need to be prepared, and I need to be quiet in my office before I go teach my course, and just kind of center myself and get myself together. And all those skills are just so important in life. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that even as a parent, you try to use some of those skills when, things get overwhelming. trying to find those moments where you can just kind of be quiet, whether it's in the car for a second, for a second longer, or what it is, whatever it is. And those little things I think are just so poignant and so important. And in the more I reflect on my career and share things with my athletes, the last thing I'll mention to you is just the importance of sharing failures with my athletes. Wasn't something that I used to do a lot. My athletes always saw, particularly early in my coaching career, always saw that, oh, Leisha's the national champion and has been to worlds and they know all the great stuff. And I remember I had an athlete who just had a really bad performance. And I was consoling her, and she was like, well, I don't know if you know how I feel because you like won everything. And I remember thinking, wow, they I had to have like that was a coaching stop moment of, wow, I need to share more of my failures with my athletes, as raw as sometimes they are still. We know we hold on to those, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about that bad performance I had in 1996, but like I have to share that with them so that they can be like, oh yeah, okay, you've gone through it, or like I know how to bounce back. And the reason why I was successful as an athlete is because of those 2 or 3 years I had before I was national champion, where I was barely making finals at world at nationals, um, and meant to stop my career in 1992. And because things weren't just going the way they're going, and so I'm more conscious now about sharing those experiences, sharing those, like, yeah, I've had 8 drop performances. I remember them. They're not great, but you can bounce back from them. And now it's about us working together to figure out, what we need in order for you to feel more confident. Is the routine too hard? Maybe it is. Maybe we got to take out a couple things, make it a little easier so that you can build your confidence and feel a little bit better about it. But yeah, baton's a pure sport that way, in terms of learning how to bounce back between events, learning there's many events. So learning how to manage that, reflecting on what you need to do, and then thinking about how you can move forward.
Well, as a coach, as a sports psychologist, you're passionate about giving young people great experiences in the sport that you've been passionate about for and participating in for many many years. As an academic sports psychologist, as a researcher, a teacher, you're passionate about researching positive youth development through sport. And I want to turn our
Yeah.
attention to that. You've got a project called Score,
Yes.
which we're going to talk about. But can you introduce us a little bit to positive youth development through sport?
Yes.
What does that specifically mean?
What a great introduction, because as you say that introduction, it reminds me of just like how blessed I am that I can uh, be a coach and a researcher, and that I'm able to like actually use all the stuff that I'm researching, which is fantastic. Which is I love that I can do that, and I think that's why I love this field so much. So the field of positive youth development really speaks to it's kind of a strength based way of thinking about how we develop young people, and thinking about building their assets, building their positive qualities, instead of just repairing negative behaviors, and thinking about, so trying to think about a more proactive approach to thinking about development instead of a reactive approach. One quote that when I started my PhD always stayed with me was this idea that skills are taught, not caught. So it's really important that we have to teach young people these skills, and we can't just leave it up to the gods to to have them learn things. Now, we know that through vicarious experience, yes, you can learn things. Um, in sport with skills as well. I can learn a lot of skills through play without somebody actually telling me what to do. But sometimes, particularly with foundational techniques, you need someone to be there to teach you that the technical things, and to and to help you refine, even if you know it well. We all know even high performance athletes, the best athletes, are still refining skills. So to me, it's the same thing when we think about positive skills, thinking about positive assets, and building some of those pro-social skills that we need in sport, those psychosocial skills like problem solving, like teamwork, like communication, respect, fair play, all those things. To me, yes, we can, at a foundational level, there's things that we have to teach. And then as kids develop and they stay with you through being emerging adults, now we're thinking about how we're refining these skills. One thing I really appreciate about my coaching career is that I've been able to have longevity in terms of specific athletes that I've had in my club for a really long time. So it's not unlike, maybe it's unlike other sports because baton's so small, but I've taught recreational classes. I don't do much recreational now, but I was definitely doing recreational baton. And some of these kids would stay with me from the time they were 6 until they were 18, or 19. And I would take them through their competitive career. And we go into international competitions. And being able to see that progression again allows me to think about, as a coach, how I'm refining. Yes, there are those base skills that we talk about: teamwork, how to communicate properly with your teammates, how to problem solve, the mental skills that we talk about. But then above and beyond that, as become adults, and now they're in university or college or starting careers, and now they're dealing with I've had so many athletes come in and just be like, oh my god, my coworker today, and I'm like, oh, just like sounds like maybe a teammate that you might have had 10 years ago, you know what I mean? And let's figure out how we're dealing with that, or what are things that you're doing in baton that can help you with that. But we have to have that type of explicit conversation. And I don't want to leave it up to chance for them to later on make that connection. As a coach, I can make that connection for them right away. I can, like, when they start complaining about things at work or time management, particularly as they get older, like, oh, I'm trying to compete still, but I have, personal relationships that I'm dealing with now. I have work, I have family, I have like some community work that I like to do. I have all these things. Okay, so now we're talking about time management. So I'd say, like, so what are some things that you did, in baton, like earlier in your career, to sort of help you get here? Or what are some things that we can learn now? But we have to have these conversations because things don't just happen. We do have to teach kids, and sometimes they have a really hard time engaging coaches because they're like, well, I have to worry about their skill development, and I'm getting their practice plan together, and I'm trying to do this and all these skills and drills that I have to do. Where do I have time to even talk about positive development with them? Um, and I tell them, well, just like this, the skills and drills are part of your job, this part is part of your job, and almost the more important part of your job, because kids will remember the skills and drills, of course, um, but they remember other things as well. The late great Dr. Maya Angelou said, "People will forget what you did. People will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that feeling, and that feeling is what coaches can really cultivate, and that's what kids remember from their sport experience. So they'll remember when you were caring and took some time to just talk to them about something else that wasn't related to their skill development. They remember those things. I don't like that they remember those things, because I feel like with my athletes, I'm like, how come I'm giving you that correction for the last 6 months, but you can remember something that happened when you were 12 at nationals that was so silly and ridiculous. Happen. But they remember those things because of those just positive memories and the warm feelings that they get from thinking about
Mhm.
those things. So we have to cultivate those things. And ironically, when you deal with that stuff, the performances start coming. The actual outcomes of sport, when we talk about winning or being successful or being the best that athlete can be, that starts coming because now you've kind of unlocked a space where they can actually be themselves, and compete with who they are, and compete with a little less stress and pressure, because they know that they have someone who really cares about who they are as a person.
What I'm hearing here is I suppose manyfold, but certainly twofold. Positive youth development. Really, the philosophy here is striving to help coaches see their coaching lens and have a lens of participation, progression, and performance within sports, beyond the X's and the O's,
Definitely. Yes.
towards those skills and competencies, the personal, the intrapersonal, and the interpersonal skills and competencies that you've outlined there. So that's number
Mm.
one.
Mm.
But number two is that sort of addendum of we have to purposefully teach those skills and competencies within the skills and the drills, on the grass, on the court, on the course, on the ice, in our conversations, and prior to an activity, and maybe between reps, and so on and so forth. So there's that two-pronged philosophy of coaching being beyond the X's and the O's
Mm.
towards these interpersonal and intrapersonal skills and competencies, and then purposefully teaching those.
Absolutely, the importance of intentionality. That the research that we've been a part of, not just me, but Dr. Nick Holt has kind of led this at the University of Alberta. A lot of work where we've done meta studies looking, and when we look at across a lot of different studies in positive youth development, that idea of intentionality really stands out. The importance of being very clear and deliberate in the way that we're coaching, um, and it doesn't, I don't want it to feel not genuine, for sure. And I think some coaches are worried about that. It's not going to feel genuine if I just stop and start talking about something. But I think it's also being in tune to when those opportunities come up, and those opportunities come up all the time.
Finding the connections, right?
Finding the connections. When they have to be persistent in a drill. We talked about persistence before. When they have to be persistent in a drill, equating that to, like, there'd be very many opportunities in life where you're going to need to display this type of persistence, right? Whether it's going to be persistent in looking for a job, in your university work, in studying for an exam, in developing personal relationships, with partners that you might have. It's going to take some intentionality and some persistence. So here's one platform in sport where we start practicing what it means to be persistent. And at the end, when you feel that success, just how great that feels. In baton, because it's so repetitious, we do a lot of drills. I know sometimes, we'll do, especially little flips, little things that just need to be automatic. It's a big trick when you're little, but then as you become earlier, it becomes a connection between a lot of different things. And those little connections, those are little drills that, catch 100 of those, and like when they're younger, they're like 100. That's a lot, but I know as a coach, I can see 5 years from now, I know that this little 100 trick is not going to be a major trick when you're older. That's going to be a little tiny thing that you put in between something that you don't even think about anymore. So I can see the long-term goal of that particular skill. Now it's also trying to see the long-term goal of some of the psychosocial things that we're trying to develop. So we just have to, we know we have experience as adults. When we're coaching, we know that you're going to need some of these skills for all the different things that happen in life.
Yeah.
So it's preparing them for that, even when they're, even when they're little, just like, we talk about schoolwork, and they're little and they're getting frustrated with something. I'm like, well, do you get frustrated at school with something? Like, and I tell them, I'm horrible in math. Math is something that frustrated me to no end in school. So I understand that. Like, there's things I didn't like. Do you have something in school you don't like? And they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this. Okay, well, but you have to learn it, right? Yeah. Okay, well, what do you do in school to help you learn it? Okay, well, let's use that same thing here then. Like, let's, it's easy to make those little one-on-one things. And then what we do through Project Score is really think about this online platform that we really wanted to just try to lay out some of these skills for coaches that's just laid out so that they have some specific score plays that they can follow to help them develop.
Well, I'm really keen to get on to Project Score
Yeah.
and put some more meat on the bone with regard to what you've just said there. Again, what I'm hearing here is, it's almost cliche to say sport is a metaphor for life. I suppose,
Yeah,
sport teaches us skills for
yeah.
life. But what PYD does, what positive youth development research in positive youth development does, is it kind of argues for a more concrete form of that. Well, what do you mean it's a metaphor for life? What skills? How are we going to do that? So that's what I'm hearing from you. And before we move on to Project Score, I suppose my next question there is, in your experience, you've done this research, and it's really fascinating to read your research. Would you say the landscape is still, do you think we've got a lot of work to do there to convince coaches across sports, across age groups, that positive youth development, or whatever umbrella term we have for it,
Mm.
we need to do more work here to convince coaches and to convince coaches that this is important, and to help coaches? Do you think we still live in a world of X's and O's, and we need to improve here?
Absolutely. I think that's probably what frustrates me the most about my research line is probably because we've had positive youth development researchers doing this work for 20 years, 25 years. And coaches, I think, know the importance of building people through sport. I don't think you'll have one coach that, if I said, do you agree that sport can build positive, that sport can help build people, or that sport can be positive in someone's life? But of course, every
Mm,
coach can be like, that's why I'm here. Like, because I know it
mm,
has that power to do that.
mm,
But I think what's frustrating is that even though we have that message, we provide tools, we just haven't
mm,
yet been able to get coaches to like cling on to that idea that this is something that's so, so, so important in terms of
mm,
building these positive spaces, and that it has implications for burnout and dropout. It has implications for how we engage parents in sport. It has implications for how kids experience sport and leave sport, not only sport but physical education as well. It has all those, and how people engage in sport for life. Like, we have a huge responsibility, and it's frustrating that that's not coming across. And unfortunately, I hate putting this out there, but I honestly think the only way that we can get coaches to buy what we're selling, it's not even like what we're selling, to engage in this important thing, is by mandating training. That's the only way. That's been done with respect in sport policies here in Canada, understanding about abuse in sport. I can't coach here in Manitoba if I don't take respect in sport every 5 years and do the online module and do
right,
it. I can't. I'm not allowed to coach. So,
right.
and if it wasn't mandated, would I watch them? Probably, or maybe, but because it's mandated, I absolutely do. So, so unfortunately, that's the way of coaching education. Coaches are busy. There's lots of things going on, lots of things pulling them. But I think the only way that we can get coaches to understand about positive youth development, I think to understand about even like concussion research, to understand about mental health in sport, to understand, there has to be modules that are just mandated for them to take, for them to, I think, get at least plant the seed, and then be like, okay, I can see this is important. And then as another step, if funding is even attached to that, even better. you know, like we,
Yeah.
again, just like with sport organizations and having to make changes, funding's attached to that. If they don't make changes, they don't get their funding. So, it's kind of archaic, and I feel like we want to empower people to find it and to do it themselves. But we know what's important. And so, I went to a talk at a recent conference where Dr. Camilla Knight, who's in the UK, and she's amazing.
Camilla's been on the show before,
Yeah,
so yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
She was just talking about, like, we might need less research, or less time in research right now, and just more time in like getting the word out, and not so worried
Yeah.
about us as researchers, what we're getting from it in terms of publications, but literally purely just getting in there and really helping people figure out how to do this in a practical way, because the workshops and the one-offs aren't working. we have to
Yeah.
think about how we can get on the ground and really help with that development.
You've been a coach for quite some time. I used to be a golf coach, and I would be the first one to put my hands up, Leisha, and say when I reflect back, and for example, if I was coaching a group of 8-year-old kids golf, at that time, I would not necessarily have said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm coaching them golf, and I'd like to get across some skills for life as well." If I was doing it now, I would be thinking that way, because I would be a more educated coach. It wasn't that I wasn't open. I was passionate about coaching, but I was passionate about how do I teach the golf swing? I needed to know all that I could know about technique. And so, I mean, a
Yes.
question for you: when you reflect back, when you started coaching, would life skills have naturally come through to
Hmm.
you that you needed to coach them, or was it a sort of a realization over time, that was important, like it would be for me?
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely a growth over time. I
yeah,
definitely, as a young coach, was thinking about skills development, how I'm going to get them, to certain levels of development. Um, I remember a few years ago, I had a former athlete who's like now grown mother, has children, came to watch me coach, and she said, "You're soft now." And I said, "What?" She's like, "You're a lot softer than you were when I didn't think I've changed that much, but I said, I guess that's a good thing, and it's probably, again, I have a responsibility. Another, I love Dr. Maya Angelou. So, one other quote that I have in my email is, do what you can until you know better, then when you know better, do
mm,
better. And I think when I got that knowledge starting in my master's, studying in this field, understanding how to create positive spaces for kids, if that's not going to make me do better as a coach, then I'm failing
mm,
everything. Once I know better and once I get this knowledge, and I have to think about how is that going to impact and change my coaching for the better, so that I can, be a better coach. Because I as a when you're coming in as a young coach, you're going with the experiences that you have as from previous coaches, from previous people who you've looked up to, from books you've read, from things. But then when you start getting this applied experience and understanding, who you are as a coach, you got to find out first who you are as a coach. And then once you know who you are as a coach, and your values should shift, if we're not growing, then we're dead. Like, I think that's the great Lauryn Hill said that in one of her songs. If we're not growing, we're dead. Like, we should be changing. And so when she said that to me, I could have taken that as a what? I didn't. What do you mean I'm softer? And I said, you know what? That's a good thing, because if I haven't changed the way I coach in 20 years or in 15 years or however you all are now, um, that's a problem. So I'm trying to take what I know, what I read, trying to implement that, and then again, be more deliberate. I think there's some things that I did as a coach quite naturally because I had such good mentors growing up. That when I went into coaching, I think there's some things that I did naturally come with. But again, once you're aware of them, then now it's like, okay, now I know I have to be deliberate with having these, team dinners and having these ways for my athletes to connect together, because I know that if that happens, that's the research has told me over and over again the importance of building teamwork, building that intimacy within a team, helping kids to develop connections with each other, that's going to show up on the floor, that's going to show up when they're together. um, and so that's one example, but um, I, it has to, we have to be able to change. And so that's the message for coaches, I think, is that quote is, do your best until you know better, then when you know better, do better.
love it. I love that quote. Now, from all your fantastic research into positive youth development, you have embarked on this project called Project Score, which is an online platform.
Yeah.
You've briefly mentioned it already, but take us from the top here. Talk to us about Project Score.
Perfect. Yeah. So it was started with a grant, and still continues actually with grant funding that we've received through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council in Canada, but also through Sport Canada's research initiative. And it started a little bit crudely in 2011 when we first got it, and you started with sort of these 11 lessons
Mm.
that we used to give coaches to do. And as we went through the first set of projects, we quickly realized, and I should have known better as a coach, that like it's too long for coaches. Like they're not going to do 11 things. They just don't have time
Yeah.
for it. They want to, and their hearts are in the right
Yeah.
place. They started it, they would start it, they'd get to five or six, and then they'd be like, oh my gosh, I just,
Yeah.
so many other
Yes.
things. So in 2016, we then kind of reframed it um, to looking at the four C's. So the four C's being confidence, competence, connection, and character. And focusing on the development of those four personal assets that are now part of the personal assets framework. That's Jean Côté's work. But looking at those four C's. And when we think about developing confidence, then we kind of take that one C and then we have sort of three themes around that C. That it probably still ends up being 11 things, but for some reason it looks small.
Fair enough.
Don't tell them that. But but I think grouping them into, when we look at confidence, one thing is about like one of the things under confidence is your turn. So the idea of empowering athletes and the importance of empowerment in terms of helping them develop confidence. So under that, we give them score plays. Then we have a few plays that they can just use one. They can use all of them. It doesn't really matter how many. It's the point that you're doing something deliberate. So, something like your turn, allowing athletes to develop a
Yeah.
drill, allowing them to lead warm-ups. We know that's a very the thing that most coaches do, have athletes lead warm-ups. But again, it gives coaches that confidence of like, okay, that is a good thing. That's not a waste of time. That I that I'm allowing my athletes to like do the
Yeah.
warm-up and take
Yeah.
turns and have the idea of being leaders. A lot of the things in Project Score we try to do during the warm up or during the cool
Yeah.
down. There's some things that you can't avoid that you have to do during practice. Um, some things related to connection, related to particularly with parent connection, you need to plan a little bit for. But most of the things are things that you can do before and after, or before practice or during cool down. So particularly around goal setting. So, being able to like sit with someone and think about a goal for the practice, do your practice, and during cool down, talk to that same person about, did you get your goal and what might you do next time that's different? Like little things like that. And those little skills that, again, kids can develop. And if we keep practicing, I'm sure a million people on this podcast have talked about the importance of practicing mental skills, and we have to reinforce that by allowing them to practice the skills. So not just doing it once, but you're trying to make that sort of a regular part of your practice. So um, like I just even see that in the way we approach warm-ups now, right? In sport. Like when we were growing up, we used to just like sit there and stretch and that was enough. Now we know the importance of dynamic warm-ups. We know that they need to, run back and forth. They need to do stretching while they're moving. We know the importance of that. So even during those dynamic stretching things, those are sometimes great opportunities for athletes to connect and talk, right? So without feeling like you're wasting time, quote unquote. They can do that during a dynamic while they're walking across doing walking lunges. They can talk about goal. They even can talk about their days. They can even talk about someone they respect. They can even talk
Yeah.
about something that happened in a game that they thought wasn't fair and how we dealt with it, and is that the way we want to deal with it as a team. There's so many things that we can do during those times that can just be more valuable. So anyway, so Project Score kind of helps give a tool for that, and it's a free resource. Anyone can, you don't even have to sign up, you can just use it. Just use the resource. Yeah, and so we're in the middle of a research project right now. It's a challenge, I think, coming out of COVID. That's been really difficult, I think, to engage in coaches. With coaches, they have so many things just coming at them
Yeah.
that we've been really trying to be empathetic with like coaches and not really having as much time to do this. But at the same time, we know it's important, and I think once they see that it's not as much effort sometimes as they think it's going to be,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of things that they're probably already doing, and hopefully Project Score will just reinforce that for them. Yeah, the better that we can make sport for these young kids that we have in our care.
I mean, listening to what you're saying, it sounds like Project Score is a fantastic platform for ideas around these life skills, introducing these life skills into your coaching sessions, your coaching activities, and just finding those pockets of moments, whether they're water breaks, as you said, the stretching there. And I think you use the word dynamic when it comes to stretching. I actually would use the word dynamic as well in terms of creating a really dynamic environment within your coaching practice, because you can do stretching whilst having a robust conversation around resilience. You can
Oh,
throw that in, and
totally.
players are having a water break, and that's a great opportunity to reflect on what they've just done in the activity. I mean, that consolidation period of learning, there's so many mini
Yes.
moments, so many mini pockets
Yes.
moments that coaches can utilize to develop mental skills, life skills, that
Totally.
it really does make for a more dynamic coaching environment.
Yes, and develop their own connection with their athletes
Yes.
as well. Athletes love stories. I love stories, but I think anyone in sports psychology loves a story. So we love athlete stories, but kids love stories. So when I talked earlier about sharing, failures and sharing that kind of stuff, those are opportunities that I can take, right? To like when we're stretching at the end, that 5 minutes.
Mm.
Sometimes it might just be like, you know what, you guys, like, I actually had my own mentors growing up, and this is why. Or, I actually, you know, I understand, we have a competition coming up. I know some of you might be kind of anxious and nervous about that. Let me share with you like a story that happened to, something that happened to me as an athlete, they love stories, and I think when we can share that with them, that only not only helps them, but also helps us, and it helps us to build those important connections that we need with young people. We know that coaches are amongst the most influential people in kids' lives, and I think we have to lean into that more and not be scared of that. They will listen. They listen to us, and that's a huge responsibility, and responsibility that some people take for granted and abuse. But when it's done positively, it's such a great responsibility. I love when I can, see former athletes out and about and be able to talk to them, and they reflect back on, their times in baton and what they remember and what they learned from that. I mean, and I've had former athletes come. When they come and visit, I get them to share something during stretching or during
Yeah.
something like, tell me one really good moment that you remember from your baton career, or tell me one, think of something that was really challenging in your baton career, and what did you do to get over it or learn from it. Especially, like, I feel like around Christmas time is a good time because you get lots of kids coming in for home with families, and they reach out like, do you want to, and I invite them to come practice, and meet a lot of them. Some you might know, some you might not know, but they'll get to know who you are, and create that legacy, and also just create that connection. I just think
Mm.
it's just so important, for us as coaches to learn, not for them to learn about us, and not for us to only just learn about our athletes, but they also need to see that we're human, and we have lives, and we've gone through things, and and we're willing to be open and vulnerable, and to share who we are with them. Like, I'll when I have a not a great day at work and I'm going to coach, and I walk in, I have to like stop myself in the car and be like, okay, my day had nothing to do with these children that I'm going to go see. So let me just, you know, and sometimes they'll be like, "Are you okay?" And I'll be like, "Well, work was tough today, but thanks for asking."
Mm.
And I'll tell them what a great skill you have to see that in someone and ask them about it. Don't lose that. That's all I have to say. And they go, "Oh, okay, great." Wow, does that ever make them more empathetic to their
Absolutely.
teammates
Absolutely.
quickly?
Absolutely.
Because right away they're like, let me see, is someone
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And we can call out, those are those little moments that we can call out that will have an impact. Someone will remember that for a very long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They've sensed a reward, if you like, that feeling of
yes.
reward
And a validation
from your acknowledgement. Yeah.
yeah, from an adult. I parents might do that too, but I think from another adult in their
Mm,
world. And
mm,
even when they're older, not even I coach 21, 22 year olds, 20-year olds, just being
mm.
able to be like, I really like the way you were there for your teammate today. I saw
Yeah.
that. Good job.
We all like that, don't we? No matter our age.
Yes. No matter our age. Exactly.
Absolutely fantastic stuff. Now to close, what next? What next for
Mhm.
you? What next for Project Score? Anything on the horizon? You said about a research paper that you're doing. What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, yeah. So with Project Score, yeah, we have currently a 3-year grant that we're working on that we have funding through Sport Canada Research Initiative. So we're very grateful for that funding. And we're trying to do an evaluation of Project Score now. So not just trying to look at coaches and understand coaches, but really looking at trying to do more of an intervention where we have Project Score being used throughout a month and then measuring outcomes for kids before and after the intervention. Now, we know that life skills are a slow burn. Life skills are something that people learn right away. But we're hoping even if we see little changes in the environment, the positive environment, we look for little changes in terms of their asset development. Um, I think those little changes, I think, are what happened over time. I think what we need to do is really go back over time and see 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Um,
Mm,
with certain teams, how these assets are then developing over time. But right now, it's kind of a snapshot approach. Sometimes we don't see the outcomes that we want as researchers, like really lovely, nice data that shows a really big change. But I think that's just the nature of the field that we're in. Like little changes are okay, and those can turn into big changes over time. So yeah, so we're just kind of working on that here in Winnipeg, also in Prince Edward Island with Dr. Dany MacDonald. Where we have Dr. Jean Côté as a collaborator on this project, so hoping to get some things going in Ontario. And then we have Dr. Fernando Santos, who's in Portugal, and he's also doing some work the same project there. We translated everything into Portuguese. The website's actually in French, English, and Portuguese, the whole website. So yeah, so we're doing some data collection amongst some different sites, and hopefully we'll get something in a few years.
absolutely fantastic. Now I know that you will have tapped the interest of the Sports Psych Show audience. So with that in mind, how can people find you, follow you, and potentially get in contact about Project Score, anything to do with your work?
Yes, perfect. So our email for Project Score is info@projectscore.ca. And there you can find about the research project, and we have myself and also some research assistants who are working on that website, and they'll get back to you and they can get you hooked up in the project for sure. Personally, I have a Twitter. It's DRLS250, so Dr. LS250 on Twitter. And then you can reach me at my email address, which is leisha.strachan@umanitoba.ca for any questions. And just find me at the University of Manitoba, Faculty of Kinesiology and Recreation Management, and search for me there. And you can find out some work I'm doing. And I'm always happy to connect to people.
Fantastic. Leisha, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that podcast, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via Twitter or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the Sports Psych Show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.